In the annals of World War II, countless stories of capture and imprisonment exist.
But few are as uniquely compelling or as profoundly challenging to ideological warfare as the one that unfolded in a quiet American prisoner of war camp. Imagine, for a moment, being a soldier on the losing side, captured and indoctrinated with years of virulent enemy propaganda, only to encounter a reality that dismantles every lie you've been told. This is not a hypothetical scenario. By September 1944, as Allied forces pressed deeper into Europe, the Crossville, Tennessee POW camp became the improbable crucible for such a truth. Here, Sergeant Martha Reynolds, tasked with managing the women's section, braced for an unprecedented arrival. 37 German women, the first of their kind in American custody. These were not frontline combatants, but highly trained Wehrmacht auxiliaries, radio operators, nurses, and vital communication specialists from the Luftwaffe. And here, they had voluntarily enlisted, fueled by unwavering belief, and now faced incarceration in a nation their leaders had painted as decadent, barbaric, and morally depraved. This marked a profound departure from the typical weary conscripts Martha had processed. These women embodied the resilience of a crumbling regime, yet their minds were still captive to its most insidious narratives. Among them, one figure stood out. Ingrid Weber, an actress in El Farin, or signals auxiliary captured near Saint-Lay, France. Her steadfast refusal to yield information during interrogation underscored her fierce loyalty and the deep-seated convictions that would soon collide with American realities. This initial encounter between ideologies, between propaganda and principle, would redefine their understanding of war, humanity, and perhaps even themselves. Before we delve deeper into this extraordinary account, please take a moment to like this video and share your first impressions in the comments below. Your engagement fuels our exploration of pivotal historical moments like this. Martha observed Ingrid Weber assessing the camp with a critical eye, noting the guards' positions, the height of the fences, and the layout of the buildings. Even in defeat, she retained the sharp, strategic mind of a soldier. Sergeant Reynolds, Harrison continued, his tone serious. These women have been indoctrinated with atrocious narratives concerning American cruelty towards prisoners. Some even anticipate torture, starvation, or worse. Your primary objective is to demonstrate our true character. Martha grasped the profound irony. After years of Nazi propaganda portraying American brutality and moral decay, these prisoners were about to encounter amenities like flush toilets, hot showers, 3 square meals daily, and treatment guaranteed by the Geneva Convention, standards significantly surpassing anything they had known within their own military. "Sir, what's the immediate priority?" Martha asked. "Housing assignments, medical examinations, or the camp regulation briefing?" Harrison closed the file, his gaze softening. "And, Sergeant, exercise patience. They will be profoundly disoriented by what they discover here." As the women were escorted towards the processing building, Martha observed their instinctive tendency to cluster, forming a protective circle around the injured and frail. Even in captivity, the wartime solidarity that had sustained them remained palpable. Yet, she also noticed something else. Their eyes lingered on the American Guard's pristine uniforms, the meticulously maintained barracks, and the trucks laden with food supplies headed for the camp kitchen. For the first time, a flicker of doubt registered in their gaze, unsettling everything they had been told about their enemy. Inside the processing building, a palpable tension permeated the air. The German women sat on wooden chairs, their hushed whispers a mix of apprehension and muted defiance. Ingrid Weber sat straighter than the rest, her jaw set firm, despite the gnawing uncertainty in her stomach. "You will be called one by one for registration," announced Corporal Davies in carefully articulated German. His accent was rough, yet the effort to speak their language surprised several of the prisoners. Following registration would be medical examinations, dormitory assignments, and an orientation to camp procedures. When Ingrid's name was called, she rose with military exactitude and followed Sergeant Reynolds into a small office filled with filing cabinets and official photographs. The American woman behind the desk was younger than Ingrid had anticipated, perhaps in her early 30s, with kind eyes that seemed at odds with her uniform. "Please sit," Martha said in fluent German, eliciting a slight arch in Ingrid's eyebrows. "I studied at Heidelberg University before the war. A beautiful city, Indeed, Ingrid replied guardedly, uncertain if this was merely a subtle interrogation technique. Martha opened a thick folder. According to your records, you are 24 years old, from Muni, and served as a communications specialist with Army Group B. You were captured near the Belgian border while attempting to maintain contact with retreating forces. Name, rank, and serial number. Ingrid recited, "That is all I am required to provide under international law. And that is all we require." Martha responded with a reassuring smile. "This is not an interrogation, FAR Ingrid Weber, but a camp orientation. You will be here for some time, and we wish to ensure your full understanding of all procedures." Indeed, through the office window, Ingrid could see other German women being escorted to a long, low-slung building. No one was shackled, nor were they under harsh guard. American soldiers moved casually throughout the compound, many laughing and conversing among themselves. This bore no resemblance to the grim prison camps depicted in Wehrmacht training films. "What will become of us now?" Ingrid couldn't help but ask. "You will be assigned to a barracks with 5 other women. 3 meals a day in the mess hall. Labor assignments, to keep you occupied: laundry, kitchen duty, camp maintenance and recreation time, including access to books and materials for writing letters home." Ingrid stared at her, assimilating the information. "You may send 1 letter home per week through the International Red Cross. Your family has the right to know you are alive and well." Martha made a note in the file. "Is there someone in Munich who should be notified of your situation?" For the first time, Ingrid's composure showed a slight fissure. "My mother. She doesn't know what happened to me after the retreat." "We will notify her," Martha affirmed, rising from her chair. "Now, I'll take you to your barracks. I think there's something you should see." They walked through the camp, passing American soldiers who offered polite nods, rather than derision or threats. They passed a garden where some prisoners tended vegetables. They observed a recreation area where German men played soccer, with guards watching from the sidelines, showing no overt tension. "This makes no sense," Ingrid murmured, her brow furrowed. "We were told American POW camps were ... double quotes." Martha gently prompted. Ingrid offered no direct answer, but her profound confusion was evident. All she had been taught about American brutality was systematically contradicted by the undeniable evidence before her eyes. They reached the women's barracks, a clean, well-constructed wooden building featuring proper windows and what appeared to be ample heating. As Martha opened the door, Ingrid stepped inside, then froze, her eyes widening in disbelief at what lay beyond the threshold. "This is your bunk," Martha said, gesturing to a bed with clean sheets, a pillow, and a small locker for personal belongings. "And through that door, I think you'll find something quite interesting." Ingrid followed her towards a door marked with a symbol she didn't immediately recognize, her heart pounding with a mix of anticipation and dread, uncertain of the revelation that awaited her. Ingrid stared into the small room, utterly bewildered. White porcelain fixtures gleamed under an electric light, the air imbued with a clean scent of disinfectant, a stark contrast to the familiar stench of military latrines. She had seen flush toilets before in wealthy Munich homes, in pre-war hotel lobbies, but never within a military installation, let alone a prisoner of war camp. "I don't understand," she whispered, approaching the commode as if it might explode. "This is for prisoners of war. All barracks have indoor plumbing," Martha explained, observing Ingrid's incredulous expression. "Hot and cold running water, flush toilets, and a proper sewage system. The men's barracks have the same facilities." Ingrid tentatively reached out and pressed the handle. Water swirled efficiently, then refilled with an almost miraculous mechanical precision. In Germany, even before the war, most soldiers used outdoor pit latrines or rudimentary facilities. In the final months of the conflict, finding clean drinking water had been a luxury, let alone any form of modern sanitation. "Back home," Ingrid whispered, even officers' quarters didn't have anything like this. "How is this possible?" "American engineering," Martha stated simply. "Most homes in the United States feature indoor plumbing. Incorporating it into camp construction was simply standard practice." Through the thin walls, they could hear the reactions of the other German women discovering their own bathroom facilities. gasps of astonishment, excited chatter, and the repeated flushing sounds as prisoners tested the mechanism. One woman even began to weep. Martha couldn't discern if it was from relief, shame, or sheer overwhelming disbelief. "We were told," Ingrid began, then faltered. "Told what?" Martha prompted gently. "That Americans were barbarians, that you treated prisoners worse than animals, that your cities were rife with crime and poverty, that your soldiers were undisciplined criminals." Ingrid's voice grew softer with each word. "But these facilities are better than those in many German civilian homes." Martha nodded thoughtfully. "Propaganda functions reciprocally, Fräulein Weber. I assure you, we have also been informed of equally unflattering things about Germany." Ingrid sat heavily on her bunk, staring at her hands. "Haru hun." The other women in the barracks were exploring their new quarters with increasing wonder. Clean mattresses, ample heating, windows that actually opened, and lockers for their few remaining personal effects. "Ingrid." A voice called from across the room. "Ingrid Weber." She looked up to see a familiar face. Greta Hoffman, a radio operator from her unit, captured during the same retreat. "Greta, you're alive." The two women embraced briefly, both suppressing tears. In the chaos of the final battle, they had been separated, each fearing the worst for the other. "Did you see the bathroom?" Greta whispered, her voice filled with a stunned urgency. "Did you see what they've given us?" Before Ingrid could respond, an American soldier appeared at the doorway, a young corporal with kind eyes and a cautious demeanor. "Ladies," he said in halting German, "dinner is ready in the mess hall. Please follow the marked path." The German women exchanged glances. In Wehrmacht camps, meals were often irregular, sometimes entirely cancelled when supplies ran short. The notion of a scheduled, consistent meal sounded almost too good to be true. As they made their way towards the mess hall, Ingrid noticed more details that sharply contradicted her expectations. American guards actively yielded passage to the prisoners. The barracks were well maintained, weatherproof. German posts worked in gardens, played cards, and read books, all under minimal supervision. "This isn't right," she whispered to Greta. "They can't treat all prisoners this way." "Perhaps," Greta softly responded. "We've been wrong about more than just the toilets." The mess hall doors swung open before them, revealing long tables set with cutlery and American soldiers serving food from large cauldrons. The air was rich with the aroma of real meat and vegetables. This was not the thin gruel and black bread they had subsisted on during the war as final months, but substantial fare, signaling their captors' attention to nutrition. As they sat at their assigned table, Ingrid overheard snippets of conversation from longer-term German male prisoners. Stories of medical care for the sick, packages from home, even recreational activities and educational programs. Each detail chipped away at her fundamental understanding of American character and values, forcing her to confront a disturbing question. If they had been so profoundly wrong about something as basic as POW camp conditions, what else had they been mistaken about? 3 weeks later, Ingrid was assigned to work in the camp laundry with Sergeant Reynolds, who seemed determined to engage the German women despite their initial resistance. "Your English is improving," Martha observed, watching Ingrid efficiently sort clean uniforms with methodical precision. "Have you been reading the books from the camp library?" "Reading helps pass the time," Ingrid replied cautiously, unwilling to admit how desperately she sought information about America, about this nation that built POW camps with flush toilets and 3 square meals a day. The laundry room itself was warm and well ventilated, equipped with modern washing machines, a luxury even in pre-war Germany. The work there resembled factory employment more than prisoner labor. Even the American guards treated the German women with professional courtesy, rather than the hostility she had anticipated. "Martha," Ingrid interjected suddenly, addressing the sergeant by her first name for the first time. "May I ask you a question?" "Of course." "Why are you so benevolent towards us?" "We are your enemies, having fought against your soldiers and allies. In Germany, enemy prisoners are not always... ... She struggled to find the appropriate words. her voice trailing off. Martha continued, folding laundry, choosing her words carefully, because this is who we are, or at least, who we strive to be. The Geneva Convention outlines minimum standards for prisoner treatment, but America often goes beyond those standards, because we believe it reflects our values. Our values dictate that every person has dignity, regardless of the uniform they wear or the flag they salute. Humane treatment of prisoners isn't just about adhering to international law. It's about upholding our own humanity. Through the window, they could see German male prisoners playing volleyball in the recreation yard. Their laughter echoed across the compound. American guards watched from the sidelines, occasionally joining in conversation or settling minor disputes with patient authority. In our training, Ingrid murmured, her voice barely audible. We were told Americans had no culture, no honor, that you were driven only by money and comfort, and would collapse in the face of determined resistance. And what do you think now? Martha pressed gently. Ingrid paused her work, considering the question with deep sincerity. I suppose our leaders conveyed what they needed us to believe, not necessarily what was true. That evening, she sat on her bunk, writing her weekly letter home. She struggled to describe her experiences without revealing information that might be censored or misunderstood. How could she explain to her mother in Munich that sanitation in an American POW camp was superior to most German barracks? How could she convey the medical care, recreation time, and regular communication privileges granted to prisoners? What are you writing? Greta asked from her neighboring bunk. I'm trying to tell my mother I'm safe, but I don't want it to sound like I'm praising our captors. Greta lowered her voice. Some women are discussing the possibility of requesting to remain in America after the war. They say prisoners can apply for immigration status, and families back home can sponsor them for permanent residency. Ingrid looked up sharply. That's preposterous. Who would want to stay in enemy territory? Look around, Ingrid. Is this truly enemy territory? Or is it simply different from what we expected? Before Ingrid could respond, Corporal Davies appeared at the doorway, distributing evening mail. Several women received letters from home. As always, their reactions were complex. Joy at news of family, sadness at Germany's continued hardship, and an ever-deepening confusion about their own circumstances. Weber, Ingrid. Davies called out. International Red Cross Parsa. Ingrid accepted the small box with trembling hands. Inside were soap, cigarettes, chocolate, and a note from her mother, written in a neat script. American authorities have informed us. You are safe and securely detained. Thank God. The city is slowly rebuilding, but life remains difficult. Take care of yourself, my dear daughter. Reading the letter, Ingrid realized there was no expectation of immediate liberation or rescue in her mother's tone. The war was clearly lost. Everyone in Germany knew it. The question was no longer if Germany would surrender, but what awaited its people, including prisoners like herself, in the aftermath. Greta, she murmured. What if the women talking about staying are right? What if going home means returning to nothing? Outside, American guards were changing shifts. All camp operations conducted with the same casual efficiency. No drama, no harsh commands, just professional soldiers, carrying out their duties while treating enemy prisoners with a dignity that challenged everything she had been taught about captivity. It was the first time since her capture that she began to suspect the true enemy might be the lies they had always been told. December 1944. The first heavy snowfall in Tennessee brought a ripple of disquiet through the POW camp. In Europe, the Battle of the Bulge was raging, Germany's last desperate counteroffensive. And for the first time since their capture, the prisoners felt a glimmer of hope that the war might not yet be lost. Ingrid stood by the barracks window, watching American guards meticulously shovel snow with the same methodical care they applied to every task. Even their winter preparations impressed her. Ample heating, warm clothing provided for the prisoners, and no reduction in food rations, despite increased operational costs for winter. They're worried, Greta whispered, joining her at the window. Did you see the guards' faces when they read the newspapers? The radio news broadcasts are delayed daily. Indeed, the American staff appeared more subdued, more focused on their duties. But Ingrid noticed something else. Despite their evident concern for the unfolding battles in Europe, there was no change in their treatment of the German prisoners. No increased restrictions, no curtailed privileges, no sign of the retribution she might have expected if American forces were suffering heavy losses. Fräulein Weber. Sergeant Reynolds appeared behind them, holding a clipboard. Her face a blend of professional duty and personal concern. "May I speak with you privately?" In the small office where she had first been processed, Martha closed the door and sat opposite Ingrid, her posture unusually formal. "I wish to discuss something sensitive with you. We've received intelligence indicating that during the current offensive, German forces are executing American prisoners of war, with reports of massacres and blatant violations of the Geneva Convention." Ingrid's stomach tightened. She knew what question was coming next, and she dreaded the answer. "As the unofficial leader of the female prisoners here," Martha continued, her voice measured, "I need to ask if you have any information regarding German treatment of American prisoners. Not for intelligence purposes, but to help us understand what our own captured soldiers might be facing." Ingrid struggled, torn between ingrained loyalty, the truth, and a dawning realization that her allegiances were perhaps more complex than she had understood. "I was never involved in prisoner operations, but I've heard stories, not official policy, but individual commanders sometimes made decisions that were not in accordance with international law." Martha nodded gravely. "How do you feel about that?" "What do you mean?" "You've been here for 2 months. You've seen how we treat German prisoners. You've experienced the standards of American prisoner of war care. Given this knowledge, how do you perceive the German treatment of American prisoners?" The question forced Ingrid to confront what she had been avoiding. In this camp, she had seen American soldiers share cigarettes with German prisoners, offer medical care without hesitation, and maintain standards of heating and sanitation beyond anything she had experienced in her own military service. If captured Americans were facing execution or starvation, the contrast couldn't be starker. "I think," she said slowly, "that different approaches to warfare exist, some of which preserve humanity more effectively than others." "That's a diplomatic turn of phrase," Martha noted. "It's an honest answer," Ingrid retorted, meeting Martha's gaze directly. "If German commanders are executing American prisoners, they are in error. They violate not only international law, but fundamental human dignity. I can assert this now, having witnessed an alternative through the window. They could see German prisoners helping American guards distribute Red Cross Christmas parcels, a scene unimaginable in a Wehrmacht camp, where any fraternization between guards and prisoners was strictly forbidden. One more thing," Martha added, shifting the conversation. "After the war, German prisoners will have the opportunity to apply for immigration to the United States. Work programs, family sponsorships, educational opportunities. I want you to know these options will be available." Ingrid stared at her. "You are offering citizenship to enemy soldiers. We are extending opportunities to those who demonstrate an aptitude for assimilating American values," Martha clarified. "All of you have experienced our system for months. You've observed democracy, individual rights, and the rule of law. Some may find they prefer this way of life." That evening, as heavy snow continued to fall outside their warm barracks, the German women gathered around Gritta's bunk, discussing the American immigration policies they had heard about. Some dismissed it as propaganda, but others were beginning to see possibilities that had not existed when they first arrived as prisoners. "What awaits us in Germany?" asked Maria, a young communications officer from Berlin. "Bombed-out cities, occupied territories, years of rebuilding under foreign control. And here, we could have flushed toilets for the rest of our lives." A few women chuckled, but their laughter held a serious undertone. The flush toilet had indeed become a symbol of something much larger, a standard of living and quality of life, representing American prosperity and efficiency. "It's not about the toilets," Ingrid said softly, her voice carrying conviction. "It's about what they represent. A society that cares for individual dignity, even for prisoners. A nation that builds infrastructure to serve its people, not just its military." Outside, the American flag fluttered in the winter wind. It was the first time since her capture that she found herself curious what it would feel like to salute that flag, rather than oppose it. May 1945. News that changed everything arrived. Germany had surrendered. In the recreation hall of the Crossville POW camp, German prisoners gathered around an American radio, listening to President Truman announce the end of the war in Europe. Some wept for their defeated homeland. Others felt only relief that the killing had finally ceased. Ingrid sat beside Martha, who, over the preceding 8 months, had evolved into more of a friend than a captor. "What happens to us now?" she asked. "Repatriation procedures will begin soon," Martha replied. "But it's voluntary. Anyone who wishes to apply for American residency may do so." Around them, a flurry of intense discussion erupted in German. Some prisoners spoke enthusiastically of returning home to help rebuild their nation. Others, like Greta, had already decided to remain in the United States, where they had found not only flush toilets and regular meals, but, more importantly, a society that valued individual dignity over blind obedience. "I've been thinking about what you said," Ingrid told Martha, her voice filled with conviction about American values, about the humane treatment of individuals regardless of their uniform. "In Germany, I was taught that strength equated to conquest and superiority to domination. But here, I have witnessed a different form of strength. The strength to treat adversaries with kindness, to uphold principles, even when abandonment would be simpler." That evening, Ingrid penned her most important letter home. She informed her mother that she would not be returning to Munich. She had applied for American immigration and secured a translator's position with the War Department. She endeavored to describe how 8 months as a prisoner of war had imparted more about freedom than 24 years as a German citizen. 2 weeks later, as buses arrived to transport repatriated prisoners to ships bound for Germany, Ingrid and 37 other women who had chosen to stay stood watching. They observed their former comrades depart with complex emotion sadness. At the farewell, uncertainty about their own choices, yet also a profound hope for a future they could actively create, rather than merely endure. "No regrets?" Martha inquired, joining the group of soon-to-be American citizens. Ingrid smiled, recalling her initial astonishment at the indoor plumbing and its subsequent symbolism. "How could I regret choosing a nation that treats its enemies with greater respect than my own country treated its own people?" As the buses disappeared down the Tennessee highway, Ingrid realized the true revelation was not the flush toilet or the hot meals. It was the profound discovery that strength and victory could coexist with compassion and humanity. Christmas, 1946. Ingrid Weber. Now Ingrid Weber Anderson, having met and married an American engineer through her War Department translation, work stood in her new kitchen in Cincinnati, Ohio, preparing dinner for her mother-in-law and a few friends. Among the guests were Greta and Maria, also former prisoners who had chosen to make America their home. "I still can't believe it," her mother-in-law said, watching Ingrid deftly operate modern appliances. "You learned all this in a POW camp." "We learned more than just cooking," Ingrid replied with a smile, sliding a roast into the oven. "We learned about democracy, about individual rights, about what it means to live in a society that values human dignity." Their conversation was interrupted by a knock at the door. Martha Reynolds, now Mrs. Martha Collins Havin, also married after the war, had driven from Nashville to join their annual reunion of former Crossville posting guards. "Each year I am struck by your remarkable adaptation," Martha said, embracing each woman warmly. "But I suppose you benefited from excellent instruction in American values." "The best," Greta agreed, her voice full of emotion. "Those prison guards demonstrated that strength does not necessitate cruelty, and victory does not demand the humiliation of the defeated." As they gathered around the dinner table, sharing stories of their new lives, Ingrid reflected on the journey that had brought them there. She thought of other German women across America, thousands who had chosen to stay, to become Americans, raising children who would grow up believing that former enemies could become family. "You know what I remember most?" Maria said, raising her glass in a toast. "The first time I used that flush toilet in the camp, I considered it a miracle. But the true miracle was realizing that the men who provided those facilities for prisoners were the same men who would welcome those prisoners as future citizens." 2 second chances, Martha proposed. 2 flush toilets, Greta added with a laugh. "To America," Ingrid concluded, her voice ringing with sincerity, where they even won the victory of humanity. Outside, snow began to fall softly on their quiet Cincinnati neighborhood, where former enemies had become neighbors, and German accents mingled with Midwestern inflections. The lessons learned in the Tennessee POW camp had blossomed into new lives, founded upon the radical premise that individuals could choose their loyalties, their values, and their futures. As they cleaned the dinner dishes with still magical running water, Ingrid knew the story she would tell her future children would not be one of defeat and imprisonment, but of discovery and transformation. It would be about the day she learned that true victory entailed the strength to extend mercy to those who had once sought to destroy you.